This episode of Amateur Traveler is sponsored by HelloFresh, which is America's #1 meal kit, and by Prismatext that makes learning a language as easy as reading a book. Amateur Traveler, episode 856. Today the Amateur Traveler talks about Roman ruins and hikes, castles and mosques, beaches and the blue eye, as we go to the country of Albania. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about Albania. I'd like to welcome the show Norm Bour, travel journalist, author of Nomadic Travel for All Ages, and you can find Norm at travelyounger.com. And Norm has come to talk to us about Albania. Norm, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you for having me.
And what is your connection with Albania?
My wife and I have been full-time nomads since 2019, and Albania just happened to be one of the countries that we've had on our radar pretty much since 2019. When we left, we hit Italy and Spain, and then we had to leave the Schengen region, and then we had to go to a non-Schengen country. And we went to Croatia, which was non-Schengen at that time, and then we started looking for other places to go. And we identified Albania as being very similar to Croatia, only even less expensive. Still a beautiful coastline, but the circumstances didn't quite come together in 2019, but in 2022 they did, because we were right next door in Greece, and our time in Albania, which was about 6 months, except for 6 weeks outside the country, was just a phenomenal experience, and we got a chance to really see the beauty and the affordability of Albania for sure.
Excellent. And why should someone who isn't a full-time nomad go to Albania?
So here's the thing. Travel is back. I think that you as a travel
Yes.
podcaster and anyone who's listening to this is either a wannabe or a real traveler. And unfortunately, along with the fact that travel is back comes everything that goes with it, including the crowds and including the fact that everything is higher. When we first left in 2019, there was affordability everywhere, including in Western Europe. And then after COVID, it became even more affordable. But what's happening here, you have a very strong seller's market. So there's certain countries, primarily Eastern Europe, where the affordability factor is really strong. Turkey being one, where we spent about 8 or 9 months, and Albania being a second one. So basically you have the beauty of Greece, Italy, Slovenia, you have the greenery of Slovenia, you have the affordability of Turkey, but yet you have an amazing, brilliant Riviera coastline, and just really beautiful, wonderful people, because a lot of times Eastern Europe gets a short thrift on people think that they're curt and rude and this, that, and the next thing, but the truth is Albanian people are just lovely. They will go out of their way to help you if ever you need help or are lost or anything along those lines.
Excellent. And what kind of itinerary are you going to recommend for us?
Probably the most likely place that anyone would land in Albania was going to be one of two places. One, they're going to fly directly into the capital, which is Tirana. Albania is a non-European Union country, but yet it's striving to be an EU country, a Schengen country. So Tirana is now a city that is on the rise. They must have brought in dozens of architects from all over the world, because some of the architecture of the buildings is just spectacular and breathtaking. They have beautiful parks everywhere, and Tirana is in the center of the country, so it's very easy to access other parts. That would be one possible scenario. The other possible scenario would be coming in through Greece, through the island of Corfu. And that's where we were. We lived in the town called Saranda, which is in the very southern part of Albania. It's only a handful of miles from the Greek border, and it's only a 35-minute ferry ride from Corfu. So for someone who was coming to Albania, they would probably land in Athens, because Athens is a very large international airport with links to everywhere else. So from there, they would probably fly to Corfu and then ferry over to Saranda, or they would fly from Athens directly to Tirana and then probably take a bus, because Albania unfortunately does not have a rail system. So if you aren't flying, you are probably busing, or you are probably renting an automobile.
Okay. So shall we start from the south where you were near Saranda?
Absolutely. And I actually made some notes because I wanted to make sure I didn't leave anything out. So Saranda is in the very southern tip of what they call the Albanian Riviera. And right next to it is an area, a town called Butrint. And Butrint is not really a town per se, it's actually in a town called Samil. So I'll start with Butrint. Butrint is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And my wife and I over the years have seen, God knows, dozens of ruins and amphitheaters and castles and various things like that. But Butrint is a absolutely beautiful set of ruins. It was first started by the Greeks about 8 to 10,000 years ago, and then over the successive century it was taken over by the Romans and later by the Turks. And so it's about 200 acres and it has beautiful vegetation, unlike a lot of ruins. Some of the ruins that you find in many countries, they're like out in the middle of nowhere, they're around dusty roads and what have you, but here you have at the end of a road this 200 acres with beautiful vegetation, so you're actually able to wander through a lot of lush greenery. There's a museum there. You can take a picnic lunch. It's a 20-minute bus ride from the city of Saranda. And even though you are close to Greece, because you can actually see Corfu right off of the coast there, it's just a beautiful, very iconic location. So right next to that, you have the actual city that adjoins it, which is called Samil, which is actually spelled with a K. Samil is a huge retreat for the beachgoers. They have amazing aqua green ocean water, very Mediterranean-like. Some of the most clear, clean water you'd ever seen. And what is especially nice about Albania, Chris, and anyone else who's listening, is they really take care of their water. A lot of times you go to amazing places in the world with really nice water, but unfortunately it's full of pollution. But not here. The town of Samil has a beach called Mirror Beach, which is down in a cove, and it's just absolutely fantastic. And so those would be two of the places that that I would recommend for anyone who likes the beach, likes to lay out, likes to maybe have a little bit of nightlife, because in the city of Saranda they do have a nightlife in summer. In winter, not so much. It's a very quiet town, not quite a ghost town, but a very sleepy town in the winter.
You were there for most of 6 months. Is there a season that you would recommend for this region?
Depends on what you're into. If you want to be there during the peak of the season, you would want to be there right now. You and I are speaking the middle of June, and like a lot of European locations, they have their very active holiday season, because in Europe, when they're entitled to 6 weeks holiday, they take 6 weeks holiday.
Sure.
So for people who want to be there during when everything is going on and everything is open, the month of June would probably be a good time to be there before it starts getting really crowded. We were told by people who live there and people who have been there before that July and August, all hell breaks loose. That's when we get our butts out, because we don't like crowds beyond a certain point. So as permanent nomadic travelers, we have to find refuges from that. But for people who are really into the nice warm weather, and we're talking about 70-degree Fahrenheit, very comfortable water, and it will stay that way. The water will actually stay warm through September and October. So for someone who wants to have the best of both worlds, they want to have the nice warm air temperatures and the nice comfortable water temperatures, I like the month of September and October, because most people are done their holidays, the kids are back in school, and so for someone who wants to visit a really nice resort type of area, get away from the crowds, and also get away from the high prices, because what people pay per night during the summer is about what we would pay per week during the off season.
Okay. And I'm guessing, I know we're recording right now with you're in the Zagreb, so in this region of the world, down here in the Balkans, if I want to avoid the crowds in the summer, inland is probably going to be better.
Inland is definitely going to be better. Also, another way to get the best of both worlds is go up in elevation, because like a lot of the world, the temperatures are changing. It seems like we have milder winters, and we also have warmer summers. So for people who want to vacation and don't want to sweat it out at the beach, Sometimes you can go inland, and that's what's nice about Albania. We have been to a lot of the countries with some beautiful mountains, and just before we left the town of Saranda, we actually rented a car and we drove up the coast because we were looking at other towns that we wanted to take a look at. And so we did that over a period of about a week, and we went to this town called Vlora, spelled Vlore, which is along the coast, but it's a much more cosmopolitan town. Saranda is very small. It doesn't have all the features and benefits that you would find in some of the larger towns, but the drive up the coast was just spectacular. We went through this pass. I have to look it up. Oh, it's called the Lagaro Pass. So I'm a car guy. I love windy roads. I'm a motorcycle guy. My wife and I right now are traveling on a motorcycle. So there is a pass called the Lagaro Pass, which is about an hour and a half north of Saranda. So for someone who is starting in the south, or starting in Tirana and going south, you definitely want to go through the coastal route, because you have the town of Vlora, you have the Lagaro Pass, which is 3,400 feet up from the ocean, and it goes through this mountain pass called Mount Sika, and it's just absolutely breathtaking. And then also along the way, you go through a town called Tepelini. One of the things that people should know about Albania and certain other countries, they have a lot of natural springs that are bubbling up directly from the earth, and they are a color that you can't even imagine. When we arrived in Saranda and in Albania back in November, we were in a bus from Athens, and we're driving along this stream, and we were looking at it and said, that can't be natural water. We thought it was something maybe like a water purification plant or something, because the water was, I've never seen anything like it. But come to find out, it is actually originating from a stream there called the Blue Eye, which is about a 30 minute drive from the town of Saranda. It's a natural spring. No one knows exactly how deep it is. They've gone down as far as 50 meters, and the water comes out with so much force that divers cannot get down beyond a certain depth. And we had a chance to go out to the Blue Eye, which is just spectacular. For nature lovers, Albania is just the bomb, I have to tell you, Chris, because it's got a lot of places to camp. It's got a lot of mountains. It's got great hiking. In the 6 months that I was there, I joined a hiking group, and we would go out every week or every other week, and it's just a really awesome place for outdoors people.
My mental image, and from some of the pictures I've seen of this portion of Albania, this part of the coast here around Saranda, is that it's similar in geography to some of the coasts of Croatia, with the mountains coming right up to the seashore. Am I in the right ballpark?
You are right in the ballpark. And I lived in Southern California for 40 years, right by the beach. And there was a town there called Laguna Beach, which you have hills, not mountains, but hills that basically come over to the waterfront. And that's what's beautiful about it, is that you're there at the beach and yet you're looking up at hills. But in Albania, in Montenegro, in Croatia, all along the Aegean, Ionian Sea here, the mountains literally abut into the ocean. So as you are driving along the coastline, you are looking at one side of the window and you've got the ocean, and you are looking at the other side of the window and you've got these huge mountain peaks that are just absolutely spectacular. The topography, the geography of the Balkan countries of Eastern Europe is just so iconic. It's so unique that until you see it, it looks like something out of a movie or out of a television show, but it really does exist.
Excellent. This episode of Amateur Traveler is sponsored by HelloFresh. I think by this point you know who HelloFresh is. They're America's #1 meal kit and a great option for summer. Make your home the hangout place this summer with crowd-pleasing meals. From a backyard bratwurst bar to tangy key lime pie, HelloFresh Market makes summer entertaining a cinch. And did you know that HelloFresh offers more than just delicious dinners? It's now easier than ever to skip the extra grocery store run by adding snacks, sides, and more to your weekly order. Simply shop HelloFresh Market and take your pick from curated selections of over 100 items. Just another way that HelloFresh can save you time. So when you eat dinner fast, don't call it delivery, think HelloFresh. Their fast and fresh recipes are ready in just 15 minutes or less. Plus, HelloFresh is 25% cheaper than takeout. Go to HelloFresh.com/amateur50 and use code amateur50 for 50% off plus free shipping. To repeat that, that's go to HelloFresh.com/amateur50 and use code amateur50 for 50% off plus free shipping. And thanks to HelloFresh for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. And the other thing that I'm seeing is that my beaches are probably a little more pebbles than sand, but also that means that my water is going to be clearer. And
yeah, that's a catch-22 in my world because I can't walk on pebbles very well, but it's certainly a lot cleaner on your feet than walking on sand.
Right.
But yes, there are a little bit of both. Most of the beaches in Albania and most of the beaches all along this part of the world are far more pebbly.
Right.
But what they do, so here's what's cool. Just as we were leaving Saranda, they're actually bringing in sand. They bring in sand and they put them on the beaches within the town itself. That way you have the comfort of being able to lay down without having to walk like you are walking on hot coals, that's the silly walk that Norm does when he's walking on these pebbles that are very hard on my feet.
Excellent. What else are we going to see in this region here?
There's a castle. No big deal. It seems like there's castles everywhere, but Saranda being by the water, it seems like wherever they built castles, they always built those suckers up at high elevations. And there's a castle in Saranda called Lakursi Castle. It was built in the 1500s by the Ottomans to protect against the Greeks who were coming in from Corfu. And that's what's really interesting about this part of the world, too, is you have such an intersection between different civilizations over the thousands of years. You had the Greeks back in the day who eventually were taken over by the Romans, and then, of course, the Ottomans. You have mosques that used to be churches that went back to mosques and then went back to churches. So there's so much history that it has taken place in Albania and in much of Eastern Europe. And even in the last 3 decades that we've been around, you had the former Yugoslavia, which incorporated half a dozen countries, and then they all got freed 30 years ago back in the 90s, and they are now trying to find themselves. So when I look at the countries over here, Croatia, I look at as being like the most advanced. They are the most European-like as far as currency, as far as embracing tourism. Albania is more towards the bottom, but the good part about that is that you have great affordability. When you have a country that's finding itself, like Bosnia, like Montenegro, Kosovo, they haven't quite figured it out yet, and so you have wonderful affordability. So what you would normally pay for a $100 room, you might be able to get for 50%, 75% off of that. You could pay as little as $25 to $50 for a room that you would normally pay $100 or more in if you were in Greece or Italy or Spain or Portugal or some of the other more desirable locations that people go to.
It's interesting you mentioned Yugoslavia, and of course Albania was separate from Yugoslavia, but both were communist countries back in the Cold War era.
Yes.
But Albania was a closed country, and Yugoslavia was more open to the West than most of the Eastern European countries. So I think it was easier for them in some ways to get into tourism first, as they did. Albania, it's taken a little longer.
Definitely taking longer, and during the time that we were there, had many conversations with some lovely Albanian people who shared some of the horrible stories that they had. And of course, this is a part of the past that we don't like to think about or remember, but they were under a very tyrannical thumb of the Soviet Union, of course, to the point of where some of that unfortunately still exists in the older demographics. And we've seen that in a lot of the former Soviet countries where they were living in such a horrible environment that they have a hard time smiling. The younger people, fortunately, aren't quite as prone to that. They seem to be a little bit more open and embracing and a little bit more personable and vibrant. And English is now becoming readily available. So again, for anyone who is concerned about going to a country that they think is backward or maybe not as advanced as other countries, we never found any problems in any part of Albania where English was not readily available.
Got it. Where to next?
I'll tell you what, before I leave Saranda, I also want to mention something it has going for it, and that is because of the proximity to Greece, that gives you a little bit of the best of both worlds. Because just south of Sarandi is a little town called Igoumenitsa. And here's why I specifically want to mention it. You have dozens and dozens of islands off the coast of Greece, as you have off the coast of Albania. So if you're a water lover, but you don't necessarily want to stay on the mainland, you can take the ferry over to Corfu, and you can get ferries to maybe 3 or 4 what you would call major Greek islands. But if you drive 1 hour south to Igoumenitsa, now you have access to Mykonos, you have access to a lot of the more major islands because that is a larger port. And also into Greece, you have a town called Yanina, which for anyone who is into silver, as in silver jewelry, Yanina was the silver capital of Greece. And so when we were there last year, we were amazed because they had so many jewelry shops with just beautiful silver jewelry in the windows. And we found out that was because that was like the gold mining area of California, only there the equivalent would be in silver. Might want to mention a couple of other beach towns along the western coast there. So as you go from Sarande up to the coast of Philor, you also pass through a couple of small towns called Hamare and Borsh. Here's why I specifically want to mention them, because a lot of people like beach cities, but they don't like the corresponding crowds that go along with them. So there's several towns along the coast there where you get the best of both worlds, where you have affordability, you have water, and yet you don't have the major crowds of a lot of other cities. And then if you want to go inland, there's another UNESCO city called Gjirokastër. That's about 1.5 hours north of Sarande, and this is an Ottoman city that was literally carved from stone, and it's known for their bazaars, and they do a lot of crafts and what have you, and it's a culinary capital. So for foodies out there, make a note of Gjirokastër because that's a really popular place for you to go.
When you say culinary capital too, I wouldn't know an Albanian dish if you threw it at me, I think.
My wife and I are not exactly the most adventurous when it comes to food, but one of the things that Albania is known for is their fish. That they have a very substantial coastline. It's probably comparable to Croatia, which is where I am right now. So you have great fish everywhere. And one of the things that I was pleasantly surprised at is we went to a fish restaurant and they had cod. And I thought, oh, okay, I don't think I've ever had cod. And what I liked about it is I never knew, and maybe you don't know, but cod is 100% edible. It has very soft bones, just like sardines. And so when they brought cod to my table, I actually created a video of this, my first cod meal. And I took a bite and I was like, oh my God, that is just the most amazing fish that I've ever had. And yet you can eat the whole thing. You don't have to worry about impaling yourself on fish bones. And it seems like a lot of countries over here, they live off of pastries, which in Albania is called a borek. And a borek is like a small flat croissant usually.
Okay.
And inside you have cheese, you have meat, you have olives. You don't have fruit. That was one thing that I was disappointed in because I like having a pastry that has fruit inside, but it wasn't something that I found in Albania. But they have boreks of every taste and they're affordable. You can get a little borek for the U.S. equivalent of about $1.20 or something like that, and it's very fillable. And a lot of the food around the Balkans is based around their crops. So they have a lot of vegetables, they have a fair amount of lamb, fair amount of beef, nothing that really rocked my world as far as some of the other places. But for people who are more inclined to go towards fish or vegetarian and healthy type of foods, it's really a good place for that for sure. Another thing I might want to mention too is that for people who are looking to maybe stay somewhere longer than a week or two, there's huge expat communities in Albania because they offer something very unique, and that is for Americans. This is Americans only. Americans can actually live there for 1 year rather than the typical 90 days throughout most of Europe and the Schengen region.
Interesting. And is there a particular area of Albania that the expats have meandered to?
Yeah, They like warmth. They like beaches. They like their creature comfort, so to speak. And so
Sure.
Saranda is a big destination, but also the town of Tirana. Tirana, like I said earlier, is the capital, and it's also the cultural capital. They have their share of the typical ballets and theater and various things along those lines. And what's nice about Tirana is that it's a major city, of course, but yet you can drive like an hour to the east and head towards the town of North Macedonia. And that's one of the things that we did. While we were there, we actually drove out to a lake called Lake Ohrid, which was just absolutely beautiful. It was about a 2-hour, 2.5-hour drive. And once you cross over into North Macedonia, obviously now you're in a whole different country,
Right.
a whole nother culture, a whole nother currency, the whole 9 yards. But yet it's a very high elevation lake. And it's just a beautiful place to take a tour, take a ferry, and for people who are fishermen, it's a great fishing lake as well.
And that begs the question of how big is Albania? And it's, what, less than 150 miles from top to bottom?
Oh, I think it's bigger than that. It's got a fairly significant coastline. While I prattle on here, you might be able to look it up.
I was a little short. The length is 210 miles, 340 kilometers, and the width is 95 miles or 150 kilometers.
Yes, it's not a very wide country, and the catch-22 of that is that they don't have like super highways. The roads are actually pretty good, but if you want to go from west to east or vice versa, you have to go either to the center of the country or down towards the bottom of the country because there's not a lot of horizontal roads that go through the country. I might want to mention some of the northern cities, which we did not get to, but there is a town north of Flora called Durrës. That's Dures, which is also a major port for ferries. Now, here's one of the things that Albania does have going for is in the south, you're very proximate to Greece, but throughout the entire length of that 200 or so miles, you are also very proximate to Italy. So you can actually take ferries over from Corfu, and you can take ferries over from Durrës, and those are probably the two most popular ferry spots. And so what's nice about it is that a lot of times people, when they want to hit different countries while they're on vacation, whether it be for a week or 2 weeks or however long they are. And what's nice about Albania is that even though it has the ocean on one side, it's very accessible to Greece to the south and to Italy to the west. So for someone who wanted to go to Tirana, they just would have to take a bus into the city of Durrës, which is about maybe 40 minutes or so to the coastline, and then they just jump on a ferry, and 8 hours later, 10 hours later, they're going to find themselves in Italy, and now they've got a whole other country that they can be exploring there. And obviously it's a little bit more of a typical European feel, but if you go to Bari or if you go to Ancona, those are the two ferry ports in Italy, you can pretty much go anywhere you want in Italy via train, via bus.
Yeah, you're close to Puglia there, which we've done an episode on very recently. Excellent. Anything else we want to recommend in terms of an Albania itinerary?
I think the most significant thing I'd like to impress upon Albania is that people are always looking for someplace different to go. So as we spoke about earlier in the show, travel is back. And everyone is flooding to the same destinations. I follow a lot of nomads. I follow a lot of travel sites. And everyone's going to Rome. Everyone's going to Madrid. Everyone's going to Lisbon. Everyone's going to here. They're going to there. And the problem is that now you are around other tourists. And I find as permanent nomads, part of the beauty of traveling is to not necessarily be with other tourists, but to be with the locals. And unfortunately, when you go to some of these other larger destination cities, they're tired of tourists. They're tired of answering the same questions over and over again, or trying to translate a menu that is written in Italian that doesn't necessarily have an English translation. Whereas when you go to a smaller country like Croatia, like Montenegro, like North Macedonia, like Albania, you actually get the pleasure of being around locals, and you aren't an oddity to them. You're an oddity to them because they aren't used to having Americans or a lot of other Europeans, although the Brits are very popular in Albania. But the beauty of Albania is that you get to associate with more locals, and so the likelihood of actually finding someone that you can resonate with and have a conversation is much, much higher than you would in a lot of other cities.
Excellent. This episode of Amateur Traveler is sponsored by Prisma Text. You want to learn a foreign language because you know it will make your travel better, but it's too hard. Prisma Text gives you a different way to effortlessly learn a language. You read a story, you learn a language. When you go to prismatext.com, you can download a book and then choose how many of the words in the book are translated into the language you're trying to learn. So as you're reading, say, Agatha Christie, you get more and more Spanish words included in until you find yourself learning Spanish without even thinking about it. They have more than 400 different vocabulary words per book, and Prisma Text has found that it's 50% more effective than traditional language acquisition methods. You can choose from one of 16 different languages. Want to learn French while reading biographies, or maybe German with your favorite sci-fi book? It's up to you. Instead of setting aside time to study a language, instead you can practice just by doing what you want to do, reading your favorite book. To learn more, visit prismatext.com and select from hundreds of titles to start learning a language from your favorite stories. To save 20% off your first order, you can use the code AMATEUR, AMATEUR. And thanks to Prisma Text for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. Now, I know you had mentioned that you really liked the hiking in Albania, but we haven't talked about any particular hikes that you really enjoyed.
Yeah, let me make some notes because there's no way I'm going to ever remember the name of the cities that I went to because they're all so unique. But where we were, there was several other villages. Now, Albania, like a lot of other countries who came out of the Cold War, used to have thriving villages out a little bit off the beaten path that used to have large populations, but now they're very small villages. So one of the hikes that we went to while we were in Sarandi was a town called Navaret. Just amazing. It was like we would have to drive out to it. We would drive out to Navaret, about 15, 20 minutes outside of town. And then from there, you could spend hours, which is exactly what we did. And in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of fields, you'll find mosques. You'll find monasteries that are mostly abandoned now, but again, because I was part of the hiking group, we would always go out to different cities, and then there's another village called Vergo, V-E-R-G-O village, which is a conglomeration of 9 villages. They still have an olive oil factory there, mostly Muslim, as they still embrace the Muslim religion, unlike a lot of Albania, which is pretty much secular. They aren't really very religious one way or the other. But what's nice about all of Albania is that no matter what city you are in, whether you're in Tirana, whether you're in Doris, whether you're up in the north towards the Skodra area or down in Sarande, if you want to get out into the wilderness, we'll call it the wilderness. And what's really cool about a lot of countries over here is that you can take a tent with you and you can pretty much pitch it anywhere. Unlike a lot of Western countries or Western European countries for sure, they don't necessarily allow you to just throw up a tent or camp wherever you want. But in a lot of these other countries, they're truly more free, which is ironic because people say America is the land of the free, but yet we are still driven by so many restrictions. But when you go to some of these other countries, restrictions, regulations, they're pretty much don't exist.
We are not free campers.
We are not free campers, no. But out there, you can camp very affordably.
Now, you had a little tip there that you glossed over, which is the way that you found which places to hike is you joined a hiking group.
Yeah.
And was that a meetup group or was it a local group, or how did you find a hiking group to join?
It was a local group. And here's a suggestion for anyone who is looking to go to any particular area. Because we're on the move every 4, 6, 8 weeks, I always find a Facebook expat group. And what I do is I just pay attention to the conversation that's going on. And then if I have a specific question, I will ask the group, like, where should I stay? Where's the most affordable hotels? Where are the nice beaches? Because that's where you're going to get information from fellow expats as well as locals in that area. But what I did is that when I joined the Sarande expat group, I found that they had a little hiking group, a little subset. So for people who are outdoorsy, or if they want to follow a particular sport, let's just say you're a bird watcher and you want to go to a particular city that you know is known for their bird watching, just go to Facebook and type in Saranda bird watching group, and you will find all kinds of different niches, little specialized areas that people like to hang out with fellow people who enjoy the same pastimes.
Excellent. Are there other internet resources and sites that you use, or is Facebook the resource you're finding that's most helpful right now as you're traveling around?
I'm an old school Facebook guy, but there's a lot of Instagrammers, there's a lot of TikTok people.
Sure.
I don't originate too much in the way of those particular social media sites, but again, you can go to TikTok and you can go to Instagram and you can type in, let's just say you want to go to a particular city. Again, just like with Facebook, you're not going to find the same integration, you're not going to find the same degree of socialization, but you'll find great visuals as far as here's a lake that you can go to, here's a stream that you can go to, here's a hike that you can go to. It'll give you a lot more selection of different places that you can go to.
Got it. One question I didn't ask is, when we're in Saranda, is there anything else specifically in town that we should do? Any particular sites we should see, restaurants we should patronize?
Yes, I'm going to recommend that fish place, which is called Taverna Beni Pescatari. That's Taverna Beni Pescatari. And that was where we had an amazing fish dinner. And again, just to put things in perspective for those of you who don't necessarily realize the affordability, if you're in the United States, and I'll specifically mention California because that's where I lived for 4 decades, if you go out to a restaurant and you have a fish dinner and you have a glass of wine for 2 people, you're going to be looking at probably $20 minimum per person for the meal, plus probably $10 for the wine. Would you say that's pretty appropriate, Chris?
Yeah, that's $50, as I'd say.
Yeah.
Not about what I would expect, yeah.
Yeah, so you're looking at $60, $70 for a meal for 2. In Saranda, you can get a fish meal for less than $10 US, and you can get a glass of wine for about $3 US. Same thing with a beer. So 2 people plus a drink each, you're going to be getting out for probably $20 to $25. Which makes the likelihood much better that you are going to have that much more selection of different places that you can go. So again, if you're a fish lover, Albania has a wonderful selection of fish all up and down the coast for sure.
Okay. And then I didn't hear you answer sites, so I'm getting the impression of Saranda, we're going to go to the beach, but there's no other particular sites you're going to recommend right in town.
Now, to be honest with you, it's not what you would call a tourist, quote-unquote, attraction. In other words, you have Butrint, which is great for people who love history. You have Blue Eye, which is great for people who love to see an amazing spring. But it's not a big town. The population of the entire Saranda area is probably 20 to 30,000 people in the whole region. So it's a place to go to get away from major cities. Now, Tirana, of course, you've got more history, you've got more social activities and politics things.
Then did you spend enough time in Tirana that there are places there that you would recommend in terms of sites?
The only place that we really got a chance to see was there's this really awesome square called Skandarian Square. And like a lot of towns, it's like a meeting place where when there's an event going on, where there's a fair going on, that's where like everything happens, and it's right in the center of town. And that would be about the only place that we saw in Tirana, because we were only there for a couple of days. But here's what we decided. Since we are definitely, without question, going to be returning to Albania, we're definitely going to be returning to Tirana for probably at least 30 days or more. So at some point in time, maybe we'll have a conversation in the future and I can give you the details on what's happening in the capital city of Tirana.
Got it. Excellent. It sounds like we're wrapping up our itinerary. Anything else you want to say before we get to our wrap-up questions?
All I can say is guys, if you're looking for somewhere different to go that is off the beaten path, that's not where everyone in the world goes to. When people say, I went to Albania, a lot of people are going to say, where's Albania? Or why Albania? And if you go there, you'll be able to tell them where it is and why you go there. But I just highly recommend it as being a place to go. And especially if you're looking for a longer vacation. If you want to hang for 3 months, you can do that without a problem, without having to worry about any visa issues or the immigration man knocking on your door saying that you have to leave. So that's a real big advantage for someone who wants to take an extended holiday.
Excellent. You are standing in the prettiest spot you saw in Albania. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
The blue eye. The blue eye.
Okay. So you mentioned the color of the water a couple times, but
Yes.
you didn't say what color it was.
It's aquamarine.
Aquamarine,
It's
okay.
the most amazing blue-green color.
Okay.
And so you park your car, and then you walk about 2 kilometers to actually get to it, all along a paved path.
Okay.
And you're looking at the stream that's running by you, but then you actually come to the area where it's coming from the earth below. And it's the most vibrant blue-green color, and that water flows into town, and that actually feeds the water supply into the town of Saranda. It's been flowing for goodness knows how many centuries, and like I said, no one knows exactly how deep it is, but it's always cool. If you go in the summertime, it's going to be nice and cool and comfortable to the skin. Wintertime, probably cold to the skin, but just an amazing aquamarine blue-green color.
Excellent. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Albania.
So, in America, when I shake my head like this, what am I saying?
You're nodding your head. You're saying yes.
I'm saying yes. In Albania, that means no.
Okay. There's a couple other regions of the world I've run into that way, but it's hard to parse.
So here's a funny story. So we didn't know this when we got there. We went into a coffee shop, and there was a gentleman sitting in a bench seat, and there was a table in the middle, and there was another bench seat across, and there was no one there. And we said, do you mind if we sit here? And he said, yes, to us. Yes, he minded. And then we were like, that guy was rather rude. And then a couple days later, we were walking past this little other coffee shop, and we asked him a question that we were expecting a yes answer to, a positive, and the lady shook her head. And we're like, what's it with these people? Are they just crabby? Why are they saying no to us all the time? And then later we realized
Is this ham?
that no, they're saying yes when we think they're saying no, and vice versa. So you have to know going in that if someone says, hi, how are you? Are you having a good day? And they shake their head no, they're actually saying, yes, I'm having a good day. You found other countries that do the same, you said?
I can't think of where I've run into it, but there's at least one other country that we've talked about in the last 18 years, or possibly I'm remembering the last time we did an episode in Albania, but I'm drawing a blank here. Excellent. Last question for you. If you had to summarize Albania in just 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Beautiful,
Yeah.
affordable,
Okay.
friendly.
Excellent. Our guest again has been Norm Bour. And Norm, first of all, you mentioned the book, Nomadic Life for All Ages, and
Right.
that is out now.
That is out now, and you're welcome to go to travelyounger.com, and you can order it there. You're always welcome to send me an email. I love engaging with people who have questions about Albania or any other country that we visited, which is about 30 countries over the last 5 years. But yes, and it documents what it's like to leave your home country and to go to different places and learn things by your own mistakes and learn things from other people who give you insight before you make those mistakes.
Excellent. And I don't know, do you have a blog at travelyounger.com that we should be sending people to your best post on Albania?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I will send you the link, and I've got several of them specifically on Albania, and you are welcome to share them with all of your listeners.
Excellent. And if there's one that you recommend we read, which one would it be?
I think it was the one when we first got there, and it would have been from November, and it talked about how overwhelmed we were at how beautiful it was, because we took a bus from Athens into Albania, and it was overcast, and it was just a murky day and everything. And when we first got there, and when we first looked around, and when I went on my first hiking group, and I saw the amazing mountains all around me and the beautiful clear water, I was like, wow, this is heaven. This is heaven. And we were renting an apartment at that time for less than $500 US per month for having a full-on ocean view. So that made us go, this is certainly something that we need to understand and embrace and see if it fits into our future lifestyle.
Excellent. Send me the link for that, and we'll put that in the show notes so that people can find that more easily. Norm, thanks so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your obvious love for Albania.
My pleasure joining you.
My thanks, as always, to the patrons of the show who help support Amateur Traveler financially. And remember, if you're looking to get an older version of the show with the chapters and links, with the pictures and the links and things that I put in that you can display on certain podcast editors, if you're looking for something past 1 month after release, you'd have to be a patron of the show to get that version. Once I start inserting the ads, then those chapters go away. The two are not compatible, and the patrons get the ad-free version of the show. So anyway, check that out if you're interested at patreon.com/amateurtraveler. Remember, there are still spaces for next April's trip to Morocco. I'm hoping you can join us. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.